There we go. So welcome everyone. I am Kara Wilmot with RMTC-DHH, and I'm joined today by my colleague Sherry Conrad from RMTC. But the star of today's show is Susan Rose, who will be presenting on the Avenue to Progress monitoring with students who are deaf and hard of hearing. Sherry and I will be monitoring the chat for Susan Rose, and we will be also helping drop links as needed for this webinar. You should know a little bit about Zoom. Well, I'm going to skip this part because this was explaining how to use the captions that have apparently disappeared. We do have a chat box though that you can chat with us. Make sure you choose all panelists and attendees so that everyone can see it. If you have a question for everyone, there is a captioning pod on the bottom that you can click on to ask a specific question. We will voice it so that it can be captioned and everyone knows what's happening. We do have a comment from Susan Fowler. Is there any way to put your shades down so you have a back glare which makes it hard to see your face? Okay.
Let's see. I'm going to turn around and it'll be better.
Okay. So we mentioned in our email notification this webinar will be recorded and will be archived on the RMTC-DHH TA Live website. As a reminder, we do request that you take a post survey for TA Live. It's helpful for us to be able to collect the data because data is our friend and it helps us with our continued funding. So getting the feedback from you is very important. We thank you in advance for contributing to our continued self-assessment of our work. The link to RMTC is rmtc.org/TA Live, TA-Live, I'm sorry, if you want to this webinar or other webinars, and you can also complete a survey there to receive a certificate for participation. So today we have Susan Rose, who's currently a professor emeritus at the University of Minnesota, where she was the coordinator of special education programs in the deaf and hard of hearing program. She has also been a speech and language pathologist, an interpreter, and a teacher of the deaf at the elementary through post-secondary levels. She's the co-author of several textbooks, the reading series Reading Milestones, and web-based technology tools including Avenue, ASL, Avenue PM, and for the University of Minnesota's website with resources for deaf and hard of hearing. And she also participated with us here at RMTC-DHH when we hosted the Language and Reading Connections workshop in 2012. So I really am glad that you're here to join us again today to share more with us about Avenue PM.
Thank you. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thanks so much for letting me come here. I'm ready to talk about progress monitoring, and I'd really like to say a special thanks to RMTC-DHH and TA Live. This is really a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. And to Kara for making all these arrangements. It's really, technology is always a challenge. I would prefer being in Florida because it's going to snow at any moment, but it's great to be able to talk with all of you across the state. And it's great to talk to you about progress monitoring and the advancements we've made since 2012. And I hope you're going to get excited about it. And I'm going to load you up with some tools that you can use that are totally free. And we'll do it as part of this workshop. But most of all, I'd like to thank all of you for being here and being part of the webinar series. Your resources with RMTC are so valuable, and for you to take time out from your day, I know how precious your time is. So thank you for joining in on the TA Live and for listening to me talk for the next 40-45 minutes, and I'll try to monitor that we have more time for questions. The first thing I want to say, and please intervene anytime you want if I'm talking too quickly or covering things without clarity, just jump in and let me know and I'll try to respond to you. The disclaimer is up here to let you know that we have a federal grant, and I'm here because of that federal grant. We were funded last year for a 5-year project to build up the validity and reliability of Avenue PM, the software that I'll talk about today, and to make it accessible to teachers of the deaf throughout the country, actually to all teachers throughout the country, but it's really focused in on deaf education. And you'll see my colleagues listed on the disclaimer. anytime you want to contact us, you'd like us to participate in something, you have questions, please feel free. We are here for you, and we are funded to be able to support you guys. So let me know. Our goals today, and I'll run through them fairly rapidly, is first to identify progress monitoring strategies with students who are deaf and hard of hearing. Now, I'm going to cover that very, very briefly, and we'll go over some of the different types of assessments. And then we're going to cover the apps that are in Avenue PM and see if you're interested in using them. You can use them. You can access them at any time online, and I can help you out if you have questions individually later on. And then we'd also, we'll cover how the data can be used in IEP goals, although I'm afraid we may just run out of time. So I will send a document out, a handbook out on how to use the data from Avenue PM to be able to write IEP goals, to develop progress monitoring measures. So I'll send that out after the webinar because I don't think we'll get to it today. So introducing progress monitoring is really based on practices from about 40 or 50 years ago. Stan Dino was one of the first special educators to really look at progress monitoring in a very, very systematic way. His wife was a teacher, he was a classroom teacher, and as he came to the University of Minnesota, he really looked at what do we need to do in education. And so he said, if we take seriously the notion of individual differences, we have no alternative but to continually monitor the effectiveness and efforts and to adjust our efforts to solving problems for individual cases. In other words, we really want to look at students at no time as a group, but we look at each student as an individual. In deaf education, we recognize and accept all the individual differences. We've had that as a long history, and there is no one size fits all, except sometimes when we come to our philosophical orientation. We have the extreme left, we have the extreme right, we have the politics, but when it comes to teaching, each one of us really, really looks at the individual student. That's why we are teachers of the deaf, and that's been a key in our field. One of the issues is that we have to recognize what's working and what's not working. And in order to be able to do that, we have to be engaged in assessments and evaluations. Now, with that said, I love this little cartoon. This is Tina. Tina's a teacher. Tina wants to teach. If Tina wanted to test all day, she would have gone to school to become a tester. So what we really want to do is give teachers and have teachers be able to use testing, assessments for monitoring student progress. That's really being a teacher. So assessment is part of the teaching process. It is not something that's thrown off to the side. However, in deaf education, we have been confronted with the issue of assessments that don't work for us. While there's a variety of measures like qualitative, quantitative, formal, informal, multifaceted reasons for assessments, in the field of education with students who are deaf or hard of hearing, we have an extensive history of assessment, with the majority focused on diagnostic and summative assessment measures. If you've been in the field for as long as I have, you remember, and I'm sure most of you have been in it less than I have, fewer fields, but you'll remember the Stanford Achievement Tests designed for hearing impaired students. Those were normative, national summative assessment strategies that were really precursors to the summative assessments that we are doing today as part of the All Students Succeed Act. So deaf education was really one of the leaders in doing national assessments. And the reason we did them was to justify why we needed the field of deaf education. Today, NCLB and the ESSA Act, summative assessments are applied to all students, but deaf education really set that pace, even though we didn't have measures that were really reflective. Diagnostic assessments are important. We use them widely in the field of deaf education, although not many of us are really happy about the diagnostic assessments because they really don't reflect the characteristics of our deaf and hard of hearing students. It really calls for professional development. In our presentation today, we're going to be looking at formative assessments. This is an area where we've had a documented need for many, many years, and it's been identified as a significant need by John Luckner at University of Colorado, Northern Colorado, by Melissa Iscarius, who used to be at University of Nebraska, and a number of other researchers who really are looking for formative assessments, for measures that will be able to monitor student progress in a very reliable way. Now, summative data is often referred to as high stakes. They're the high stakes items. Those are the items that we look at and say, you've made progress this year, but you're going on to another teacher, so therefore, there goes the data, and we'll leave it to somebody else. That it really identifies students who are inside or outside of the norm of reference, and their comparisons to national data. Formative assessments, on the other hand, are assessments that relate to the individual student progress, and compare a student to himself or herself. We can look at the student and say, gosh, you've made progress this week, without having to look at Johnny Smith across the room or across the country or across the state. Formative assessments give us information about an individual student and the student the progress that that student is making. It's another way of identifying effective instruction. Today, there are several schools for the deaf, residential schools for the deaf primarily, and some of the charter schools for the deaf that are using the MAP or the NWEA as a tool to monitor students. In the last 3 or 4 years, their use has been slowly diminished from quarterly measures to semi-annual measures, and then into kind of, yeah, we'll use it, we don't. There's maybe 5 or 6 schools who are really still using it on a regular basis. Part of the reason is cost. And the second reason is that the data wasn't very helpful because it's not really established on the basis of deaf and hard of hearing students. Other progress monitoring measures that are used in general education and applied to our deaf students, particularly in the Midwest, is the Ames Web and FAST Plus. There are other measures that are called easy CBMs that are also progress monitoring measures that are used, and DIBBLES is another one that's used, but they're not geared for deaf and hard of hearing students. They are appropriate for use with students who are maybe students who are cochlear implant and totally integrated into deaf education. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about that. One of the big pushes for progress monitoring measures was the Andrew versus Douglas County, which is Colorado, school district. It really redefined the Rowley decision. Now, if you aren't familiar with the Rowley decision, you might recall this was a deaf young woman who is now a deaf young lady who is just charming, Amy Rowley, who was in the Pennsylvania public school system and making average progress in school. And her parents wanted some additional support for Amy. And the court at that time ruled that she was making adequate progress. And they didn't define adequate. The Andrew family had a child who is autistic, and they went to court and said, we want more than just adequate. This progress that our student is making, our child is making, is not progress. It's the same thing year after year. And what they used as evidence was the IEP having the same goals and objectives year after year, and there wasn't adequate progress being defined. The Supreme Court at that time, which is pictured here, which is now changed, envision, this is the court, the local court, defined progress as something that the students need to make, that the student has a right to change year after year. And so we needed to redefine what adequate progress meant. And so that made the mandate for documentation of progress not only annually, but on a quarterly basis. So we have that mandate reinforced by the Andrew case. Vanderbilt University did a review of all the different types of progress monitoring processes used, and they identified 2 types of valid and reliable measures that can be used for progress monitoring. One is mastery monitoring, and the other is curriculum-based measurement. Mastery monitoring is primarily based on, that can be conducted very regularly, and it's usually based on a set of skills that can be developed, a very specific set of skills that can be developed individually for each student. Curriculum-based measurement is also regular measurement, and it's on an instructional sequence, and the skills are measured as general outcome measures. So what I mean by that, in mastery monitoring, I might have an example is that the student is able to do sound symbol relationships or phonemic awareness relationships, or they identify the initial sound of a particular word. So that's mastery monitoring. The difference between each of those skills may vary when we look at the skills and see how the student is progressing. So over time, it may take much longer for comprehension skills to develop versus phonemic skills. And the other difference with mastery monitoring is that they are not combined skills. So a student may have excellent skills in identifying letter-sound relationships, but cannot do any word skill identification, or it doesn't relate to comprehension of instruction, or it doesn't relate to vocabulary or word skill development, word analysis skills. So these are individual skills that are developed, but it doesn't relate to the whole overall performance. Mastery monitoring is very typically based in skill development, in vocational development, or individual skills. Curriculum-based measurement, on the other hand, is a general outcome. So if I'm measuring student progress in 3rd grade reading, what I do is I measure the student's fluency in 3rd grade reading. So it gives me a continuum, a general outcome rather than skills. Mastery monitoring applies a lot more to diagnostics. Curriculum-based measure applies much more to overall skill development in an overall picture. So you see 2 different approaches, both very, very valid, both very appropriate, and you can use those in your IEPs to document student progress. And you might use one versus another depending on what you're trying to accomplish. So both are very appropriate. Today we're going to talk about curriculum-based measure or general outcome measures because that's very specific, and because curriculum-based measurement is much more informative as to the impact of education, of teaching, and also in looking at the development of skills overall. So curriculum-based measures are a specific approach to measuring student learning that can be used as a frequent measure. It can be used weekly, can be used daily, monthly, quarterly. It depends on how often you want to monitor and the task itself. It is the same task repeated on a daily basis across time. So you can use it across a whole year, but you're using the same task of reading fluency or writing instruction. You're using the same task across time. And the outcome of the measure is really the rate of change. In other words, it's growth. Is the student growing at an acceptable rate, or is it at a flat rate, or is it the student going down? So it looks at the performance across time over the same level of difficulty. So I use it as a parallel to FitBit or Weightwatchers. Actually, I broke my hand about a month ago, and they're doing progress monitoring using CBM measures on my hand. Every time I go in there, they use the same scale, and they're always measuring to see how well I can bend my fingers, straighten them out, using them back. That's CBM. That's a CBM measure. There's a baseline. We monitor the student, the progress week to week. We look at that progress, and if I'm not making progress, they change the type of therapy I'm receiving, the type of instruction. That's exactly what we're doing in reading. That's what we do in Weightwatchers. That's what we do when we're running track. We use the same measures over time. All of us have used progress monitoring measures for our students in deaf education. The end of chapter question exams, the measures that we use to determine whether a student is progressing have largely been, gosh, he's doing a good job today, a percentage of how many he's gotten right. The big piece here are the indicators, the standards, the probes that we use to measure that growth and skill have to be standardized in administration. In other words, we don't have a different number of questions each time we have a story and we measure comprehension. We don't have different scoring procedures. And everything that we have is very easy to comprehend, and it's objective data. It's not what I think the student did today, but what did the student do today in a very measurable form. Okay, so now I'm going to switch to CBM measures, and I wanted to do that so that we're very clear on and making sure that we're talking about CBM skills as measured by CBM measures. Please interrupt and ask questions. I know I'm flying through this because I want to make sure that I get through all the material we have, and you have some time for questions. And I've got 26 minutes left to talk, so I'm going to keep flying through here. Selected CBM measures, one that I know all of you are very, very familiar with is oral reading fluency. Everybody in the country has to do oral reading fluency, and I'll say right from the get-go, it doesn't apply to deaf and hard of hearing students, except in a few cases. We have it on Avenue, and it's called KidSpeak, but it shouldn't be used for all deaf students or for hard of hearing students, except in certain cases, and I'll give you that exception. The maze and wordmark are also two CBM measures that I'll show you in a little bit. Early or pre-reading measures that are being added on to Avenue, and I'll show you some examples, are picture naming or picture identification. That's early. Language. Is a student ready to be introduced to print and to language pieces? The second one is slash. The third one is word say sign, and that is word identification skills or sign identification skills. And the other one we're adding on is sentence repetition task, and that's copyright. And that's a measure to identify if a student understands sign language in the early stages of comprehending sign language. There's another one that's being added for more advanced, and I'll show you those as well. Okay, so we're going to get into Avenue at this stage. We're moving right along. Please interfere. If some of you have used Avenue progress monitoring in the past, you will notice if you go into it today that it's a new system. There is a new design. It's a slightly new system. It's not going to be major. All of your old data is still in the system. If you choose to keep it, you can choose to rewrite. So you can go to the old version if you prefer, but it's automatically going to come up into the new version. I will forewarn you that in the fall, there is going to be a newer version. Everything will be switched over with the new apps attached. They'll be tested out soon, but I'll talk more about that. So Avenue PM has a student management system where you register your students and a student use components where the students get registered. I'm going to show you the student tasks first. And that student task is number 1, KidSpeak or oral reading fluency. This would be on an iPad or on a computer screen. It's an app that you upload and a passage appears on the screen. This is a passage at, I think, about the 3rd grade or 4th grade reading level. I don't recall exactly what level, but you would input what level you want. The student reads it, it records it, and then the recording is sent to the teacher or to a teacher's aide, whoever you want to send it to, and it can be scored. The scoring for KidSpeak is very simple, and it can be scored at a later time. It's very, very simple, and it's just correct or incorrect. It's very easy to use, and then it scores it and maps it out into a graph, and I'll show you those graphs later. The second one is Slash.
Sue, can I interrupt real quick?
Yes, please.
Can these be used on both an Android and or like Google and iOS device?
Yes.
And then
now I have to clarify that. They're being reconfigured. No, they will be able to be used at both devices, on Android and tablets, all the tablets.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I had another question. Someone said they had requested an account and never got a reply on that request. Should they resend or? Please
do. Please resend.
Okay.
That should not have happened. There was a glitch in the system. So
okay.
resend.
Check spam too, probably too.
Okay. We will get, and if not, just send a note to me and I'll check it out and see what's happening. The other thing I might mention is when the teachers score and the graphing data, that can only be used on an iOS system. But the student tasks can appear on Android and all the tablets, anyplace. It's the student system that works on everything. But when it comes to scoring or the written task, the word mark, that has to be on the computer, on the iOS system. Okay? So that, just to clarify that. That's why I was trying to think of which systems can work and which don't. Okay, so I'm going to go back. Slash has been around for a while. We've been using this for the last 4 years. We have about over 7,000. I think they told me now it's up to about 8,000 tasks that have been completed on Slash. So we're getting some really good data. Slash is not specifically reading comprehension, but it's close. And the reason it's not specifically reading comprehension is because we have built it in for syntax control. So the very early stages of Slash has passages that are very short and start with a noun plus verb pattern. For example, the first early stage would be boy runs. And then it progresses to more complex structures, syntactical structures. So it might say, boy runs home. And then it'll get more complex and the boy ran to school. So it gradually becomes more and more complex. So the student has to be able to comprehend the linguistic structures as well as the intent. And you'll see where breaks can become very confusing if the student doesn't comprehend the text itself. So it's reading comprehension plus syntax control. So the reading levels span from 1st through 3rd grade. However, it is not clearly related to 3rd grade reading level in its pure form. If you're familiar with reading milestones, it uses the linguistic syntax that is used in reading milestones that's specifically oriented to deaf and hard of hearing students. It's based on the research that was done with English language learners and deaf and hard of hearing students. So you'll get an idea. There's also a chart that I've provided as a handout here that has the reading levels for Avenue D8, for Avenue PM, and you'll see the reading levels and the linguistic levels associated with each of the strategies. Now, one of the things I want to point out is that what we've made a really specific effort to do is to reduce teacher time on the tasks. So slash is automatically scored, and it is automatically shown to the students so they get feedback as soon as they finish the passage. So they learn right away, very quickly, what's correct and what's incorrect. There's also a game format that's used in the in Avenue for almost all of the tasks. Not all of them, but almost all of them. A few of them don't have games to them, but most of them do. So you'll see the little animals at the bottom of the screen. Each of the animals are related to a grade level, but never identified as a reading level. It's 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5. If you go to the chart, that's the handout, you'll see the animal association with grade level. So that the kids don't get, well, I'm only reading at the 1st grade level or the 2nd grade level. They'll never see that. They see the animals, and that gives them the relationship to what they need. Tasks are also timed. You'll see in the right-hand corner, there is a little clock that appears and disappears. Timing is important because we are looking for automaticity and fluidness. So the students can't go back and, oh, maybe this, maybe that, and take 2 hours where they start analyzing every little piece, but it's really what's automated, what's an automaticity in responding, because that's how we know the student really knows it. The other thing you'll notice is that there's a goal. So the students don't have to, for each level, the students don't have to be perfect, but they need to achieve their goal in order to get to the next level. So that's slash. Then we have maze is an established, another one that we've had for the last 5 years, and we have a ton of data. Maze spans from the 1st grade through 6th grade reading level. I really don't advise using maze until the students have really gotten up to like the 2nd or 3rd grade level in slash. So there's kind of a progression of tasks. The slash is used for early readers. Maze is used for a little bit higher readers going into 2nd, 3rd grade. This is much more challenging. So this is where every 7th word is deleted. There's a multiple choice. The students click on that choice. It bounces into the box, and you can see the student responses. Again, maze is automatically scored. There's a goal. The students can progress. If they meet their goal, they'll move forward to the next animal. This is also a 1-minute task. So the students can do one 1-minute task. They'll finish. If they want to do another one, they can do it. It is, if you want the students to do 1 a week, if you want them to do 2 or 3 a week, or if they want to do it for homework or on their own, that's up to you. You can let the students know if they want to use it. The other task that's built into the system that currently exists and that you can access is WordMark. WordMark is a writing assessment. It's what we call written expression assessment. The student is given a story starter that they can choose to use, or they can go to another one, or they can write their own. It doesn't matter. And the story starter comes up. I'm not going through all the animation because it would take a little bit too long, but this particular story starter was, when I grow up, I will, and the student responded, buy a car. I like to drive fast. Sometimes my dad drives. You can see it there. And this is one of the tasks that the teacher has to score. In other words, you have to look at it and score, and it's scored by correct word sequence. So 2 words together, is it correct or incorrect? Correct or incorrect? There is a professional development video on it that tells you how to score. It's fairly straightforward and fairly easy to do, but there's always a question, is this correct? Isn't it correct? So I won't go into it now, but if you want me ever to do a workshop on writing and reading and scoring, I'll come down and do it. I'm funded by the grant, so I'll do it for you. Or I'll do another webinar for you to show you whenever you want that scoring done. It doesn't take long to learn how to score this. It's really quite easy. And again, it puts the scores here, and it goes into a graph. Automatically graphs it. So what do the graphs look like? These are new. You haven't seen these before, because the other graphs were pretty linear and pretty straightforward, and teachers gave us the feedback is it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So we went to a different format for the graph. This is the cover sheet for the graph that only you will see unless you want to make it available to other people. The student can also look at this graph, but it doesn't have the levels on it. This is the reading level. These are where the animals would normally be. And it starts at first grade reading level 1.5, 2.5. So this is overall progress. This happens to be how Big Harry, and Big Harry is a real student. Big Harry progressed over time. And this is by over time means by weeks. So in 1 year, Big Harry, in 50 weeks, Big Harry went from reading level 1.0, which was really below his performance. I mean, he started at the first grade level, and that's why he progressed so rapidly. And then he went up to the second grade level, and he's reading at the third grade level within this period of time. So his reading level, actually, I know Harry, so I know when he came in, he was reading at the second grade level. And within this period of time, from beginning of the school year, or the first quarter of the school year, he advanced to the third grade reading level. Now this, I went in and I looked at Big Harry at the 2.5. I wanted to dig deeper into the graph, and this is what happened to Big Harry at the 2.5 level. So you'll see what Harry did. There's always bounce from week to week and across time. But in this case, poor Harry went downhill. He didn't do such a good job here. He went up and then down, and he went up, and then he was starting falling down. And in this particular note, he was really progressing well. The green line is the average hearing student's progress. The red line is the average progress of Harry. We have looked at this data over and over and over again because we knew Harry was really doing a little bit better. What you're going to see in the new graphs is that we don't use correct minus incorrect. We use correct only the number correct. And you'll see a little difference in Harry's performance, but you won't see that on here because we're just making that correction now. Another feature on Avenue, this is slash, and this is Big Harry in slash, is bet. I just wanted to demonstrate that you can get data week by week. You can get a data table week by week. And you can get notes about Harry. So if I went back and I looked at these 2 points, over here they have a circle around them, that indicates that I wrote a note about Harry at that particular time. So when I look at the table here, if I click on it, show or modify notes, I can write a note. So this was a note about Harry using slash. Harry enjoys this activity. His errors are specifically with combined words and adverbs. Language structures may be an issue also, but he is making progress. This is on slash, so it's a different screen that I use. So I can put a note in there if I would like to put a note in that only the teacher can view. And if you want to use this for an IEP meeting or share it with other teachers can come in, an administrator might come in and look at the notes or look at Harry's performance over time. Okay, now we're going to switch to the new tasks that are coming up. We're going to be pilot testing the new tasks with 4 schools, 3 schools in January. If anybody wants to join our pilot testing, let me know and I'll share it with you in January. We'd love to have you join in if you'd like, but it's entirely up to you. The new tasks will be picture naming, word sign say, copyright, and kid sign. Okay, so, and this will be a kind of a new layout. My tasks will be if a student signs in, only the tasks that they are assigned to, that you choose for a student, will show up. Not all of the tasks, only those that will be for that specific student. Okay, so the teacher can go in and identify which tasks they want to use by simply clicking on. This is a beginning, say I have a beginning student who is a new, is just starting school, is an immigrant, which have a lot of immigrant students who have no background in education at all. They're deaf and they have no language. We start with picture naming. And as they progress through picture naming, we'll go into word sign say. And then as they progress, we can go into slash, and if they're going to use sign, we can use copyright. So if it's an auditory oral student only or a cued speech student, you can use word sign say, you can use slash, picture naming, KidSpeak, kid sign, so you can use a combination. Okay, so this is just a sample of what you'll be able to do to pick out the student tasks. This is a sample of picture naming. This is actually the scoring part of it. I'm going to advance to the next one so you'll see. This is word sign say, and then I'll go backwards. I could not capture the screen while it was moving, so you wind up seeing me sleeping in the middle of this one. Word sign say is a task where a word will come up, the student is prompted to say or sign the word. So I could say sleep or I could sign sleep. And then it will go on to the next one and the next one. And we have up to 20 words in 1 minute. That is our criterion. This is a mastery monitoring or criterion task. And word sign say is parallel to isolated word identification. The words that are used in word sign say come from a typical curricula, the Dolch reading list, and the frequently used sight word list. So this is sight word vocabulary. It's not comprehension, but it is seeing if the students can recognize the sight words. Picture naming is an early reading task that is presented in the same way. The reason I couldn't capture it on the screen because it moved, it was always moving, but this is the scoring process. So I would have seen a picture of coat on the screen, and then I would be prompted to sign coat. You can also print out the pictures so that a student who is not able to really record and they get silly in front of the camera, that you can print out the pictures, but still score online as correct and incorrect, or it was skipped completely. When I score it as correct, incorrect, or script, the data automatically goes into the system and graphs it and provides the student with a great game-like environment of, yes, I did it. And in here, there's more badges. If they get so many correct, they'll get a badge. And they have to get at different time rates and different speeds, you'll see their progress managing. So word sign say and picture naming are pre-reading and early reading measures. The picture naming is really a language measure. A student isn't ready to learn, ready to read print until they have a base vocabulary. And that's what we're looking at in picture naming. You can't start throwing words at the kids if they don't know what it is that you're throwing the words to, what that word represents. So picture naming is really the first task in getting a language measure. Okay, and we're kind of getting out of time, so I'm going to wrap this up very quickly. The new pilots apps that will be coming out with all of the different tasks as you see them down here will also have a new format for registering students. And you can see where you can view the student graphs. And this is to score tasks like word mark, picture naming, and word sign say. There is another task that's added that I didn't show you, but it's comparable to oral reading fluency. And that task it sort of looks like this, but it has a reading passage over here that is at grade level where that student is reading, first grade, second grade, third grade passage. The student is prompted to read that passage to themselves. It's in English. They read it to themselves, and when they're ready, there's no time limit. When they're ready, they can record themselves retelling the story. So it records them. Then when that student is satisfied with their recording, they can send it to the teacher to be scored. And the way it's scored is by key phrases in ASL, if that's appropriate or not. There's another one that I didn't show you because I couldn't capture it, and that's copyright. And copyright is watching a very brief sign and then copying it, and the student is prompted to copy it. And that's a measure to see if the student really comprehends anything at all. We have a bunch of data. This is some of the older data that we have, but there's a ton of data that's coming out that's giving us the validity and reliability. We're working on that now. That's what we're really funded for in the next 5 years. And how teachers are using CBM measures across time. Your resources, go to avenuepm.com, write to me whenever you want to, send me an email. I'm going to send out a Flipgrid piece. If you're interested, go ahead, you can respond to Flipgrid and tell me what you thought, okay?
So we did have a question. Donna asked, is there any concern with getting parent permission to be able to register students for this site?
That's going to be the policy of the school because of there's video involved. We have, and there'll be a permission list, a permission form right at the front. So if you want to participate in our pilot study and we use your data, there is a separate permission form. If you're using it only for your school, there's a different permission to use video. So you have to get a permission to use video from the parents. Yes.
Okay. And Brent asked if you could go back one slide so you can see what's on that previous slide. And also, just to let you know, I did put a Google link in here of the Google folder where you can actually go and access the entire PowerPoint and all the handouts. Usually I would be able to drop files in here, but the same thing with the captioning. I lost my ability to drop files, and I'm not sure why. You know, and I'm also going to drop in there our survey before any of you try to scoot out. Is there any other questions that anyone had in the audience? Oh, we have one from Olivia. You may have already answered this question. The words you have selected from the Dolch word list for word sign say, does it offer multiple signs for the possible ways to sign it depending on the context?
The word sign say is one specific word. So we eliminated words that required a context. But we do have multiple responses just in case. And you can use kind of local signs. If anything is in there, you can override and say, yes, this is correct in our setting locally, we accept it. So it's really up to the teacher to say it's correct or incorrect.
Okay, because I know quite a few participants have recently been doing the Fairview with us, and like the word blue, could
right,
be blue or blue. Would that type of a word be in there, or?
Yeah, in those cases, those are that's already identified. But if there happens to be a local sign, you know, for birthday, for example, I mean, everybody uses a different sign for birthday, and so we say, you know, whatever's local is right, whatever you decide to use. The other thing I'll mention is that in copyright, we're using, the levels are identified by the ASL standards that Gallaudet put out. So there's 4 different levels, and so it goes from the signing skills that are appropriate for kindergarten through 5th grade.
Okay. So do we have any other questions from, let's see. Are these CBM measures accessible outside of the US, say Trinidad and Tobago?
Any place you want to use them, yes.
If you have access to the internet. So yes, they are available outside of the US. Because we also have someone from Canada here too joining us. So we have a bit of an international audience today. Very exciting.
I love it.
Would these be appropriate for non-signers?
Yes, they're not all of them. Copyright and kids sign is not appropriate for non-signers. All the rest of them are appropriate for signers. I mean, for non-signers. There's only 2 that you won't use, and they kind of go off to the side, so you don't have to select them.
Okay. I'm going to put the Google Drive again. We have a request for that. Somebody got there too. So we got it twice for the Google Drive with all the handouts and the PowerPoint. And did we get another question? The information you gather from these apps, will they help in curriculum development in the future?
Curriculum development, I don't think so. I think it will identify more effective teaching strategies. I don't think it'll impact the curriculum specifically. What it does is it says how well does this student fit into the curriculum that's currently there.
And I know personally I used Maze and the oral reading fluency, and it helped drive whether I continued what I was currently doing or did I need to change my practice. So if they were plateauing or even going down, or, you know, I knew I needed to do something different, that what I was doing wasn't appropriate for that student.
Right. And there's a whole nother training thing on when the student starts going down, what do you do? What are the options available? Yeah. And
RMTC would love to coordinate with you and bring you down to sunny Florida so you can warm up from the Minnesota weather and do some presentations here and training.
We'd love it. We'd love it.
So is there any other questions? I'll watch it real quick, but I do need to, oh, wait. Oh, goodness. Thank you for making this accessible. Yes, please come to Florida. Manatee is requesting you. They're on the West Coast near Tampa. We have a lot of thank yous, and I do want to thank you, Sue Rose, for coming and presenting for us today. I think this is very beneficial information, And I want to thank our captionist, it's Tony from Alternative Communication Services, for providing our captions today and being flexible with us and opening up that live room on the separate screen. Next month, we will have TA Live on Thursday, December the 13th, 2018, and we'll be joined by Dr. Caroline Gardino, the Associate Professor of Deaf Education at the University of North Florida, and she will be presenting on deafness and diversity. And I also want to thank all of you guys for participating with us today and being patient and flexible with us. You know, just like in the classroom, there's always things that happen and you got to think fast on your feet. We love hearing from you, so if you guys could please take the time to fill out our survey, that helps us to keep driving, that we provide things that are really beneficial to you. You can go and follow us on social media. We're on Facebook and Twitter, and we had a little bit of tweeting today, so look for that hashtag RMTC-DHH and hashtag RMTC-DHH Live. And we hope to see you next month, and we will also be putting the recording up on our website. It takes about an hour, and I can put up this one. It won't have the captions. It'll take me a little bit longer to get the captions up. So again, thank you for participating today, and I'll check one more time to see if there were any additional questions. Excited to start using it. Thank you to the captioner. Yes, thank you so much. Thanks, lots of thanks. A lot of people really enjoyed this. And is there a best email to contact you at, Sue?
Yes. srose@umn.edu. Okay.
srose@umn.edu. Oh, yep.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much. It would be worth nothing if you weren't there. So thank you so much for doing this.
So glad you could join us today.
Thanks.